You're listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
And today our guest is
Kristin Callahan.
Kristin, can you tell us what you do at Lewis University?
I am the chair of art and design. I teach mostly in the design program, and my background is in animation and motion design.
That's friggin' cool. From a physicist perspective, that is
Yeah.
really cool. Today,
much more accessible than physics.
And might I say cooler and funner?
Yeah,
Maybe.
you could.
I can. So today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. And Kristin has been looking into artificial intelligence and has some ideas that she wishes to share with everybody. So we're just going to have a conversation. So Kristin, maybe you can start us off by talking about how artificial intelligence is infiltrating, I don't know if that's the right word, art and design?
Yeah, so there's lots of tools that are being developed at this point in time for creation of imagery, music, video. Like there's a whole slew of resources that are being developed that there's some, I guess, anxiety in the art and design world because of the idea of how are these tools going to replace actual creation and people and jobs, and how are these tools going to just sort of take people out of positions that they'd be in otherwise? And so there's anxiety around my students in art in art. So my fine artists are afraid of their work being scraped as resources for.
Well, that's because it's actually happening.
No, totally is. No, totally
Yeah.
is. Well, and so the idea of like these, I guess, pool of artwork that's been mined, right, for the development of these models, and what happens? Is it then we just, I guess, reiterate on the same thing over and over and over and over again because it's easiest? Is it actually a tool, or is it just a novelty? And then your copyright, how are you even being compensated for your work being used in these spaces? So there's a lot of issues and a lot of anxiety right now in that space.
I've heard about this topic in regards to the written word, and that books and articles that have been written by contemporary authors are being scraped, and artificial intelligence can write an article in the style of a living human being now because of that. And there's lawsuits, actually, I believe, where they're trying to get money from and compensation appropriately, from these artificial intelligence companies. But I hadn't thought much about the graphic artists and the traditional artists and how it's impacting them.
I mean, I guess you could say to AI, like, make me an ad campaign for X product, and then try to eliminate the human creativity.
In the style of this particular artist.
Right, and that seems like the artist not only should be compensated, but also if you just have a limited pool, like what are you going to feed the AI its own art as its own mining, and then you just get more and more redundant and less
that's
creative?
actually happening too.
Yeah, and so there's tools, and Microsoft is helping to build one that's graphic design specific. So you would be able to put in a prompt about a specific campaign and generate posters or ads or social media content and whatnot. And I mean, it's very, it looks like everything else. It's following a formula. And so I feel like if the tools are the only things that are going to be used, that our humanity is going to get lost a little bit in the way that we express ourselves through these different mediums. And so I don't know. I hope it's a novelty. I hope it's not. I mean, and I guess the question then also becomes, where is the value in the work that artists and creators do? My husband was messing around with, I can't remember the name of it, but the one that will let you create songs. And so, you can type in a prompt. He made a song about our cat Saoirse. It couldn't say her name at all, but it was cute in a certain style, and okay, great. But, as I'm looking through, some of these different, I guess, platforms and the work that it creates, it feels like it's replacing stock imagery, stock, photography and video with Sora, as well as audio. So as a designer, when I was working professionally, we spend hours like just sifting through stock imagery to see what would make sense for our campaign, because we weren't going to hire a photographer because they were too expensive. So we were going to license an image to use in our campaign. But we'd spend hours looking through, websites. And so I guess this may help to generate that quicker, but it is also, I guess, removing a revenue stream from photographers who have already been
Right.
disenfranchised. Yeah.
But it's making it more efficient, but it's then using previous photographers' work to create this new image.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can explain to me how that actually works, though, because I don't understand. In the written language, it makes predictions as to what the next word should be based on the previous words. And I don't know what artificial intelligence, how it works for graphic art. I don't like. Do you have an idea? Can you explain how
technically it's working? I mean, so what it's doing is, like the technical side of this, if I'm recalling, I mean, it's taking multiple images of a variety of so if you're trying to render a dog, okay, so I want, I don't know, maybe a beagle on the beach, okay.
Who doesn't?
I guess. So it's going to look at dogs. So it's going to understand what is dog and how is dog, I guess, rendered, what a photo of a dog looks like. And so it has all of these images that has been fed to, so it understands what it is. And then it goes into more specifics as to like beagle. What does a beagle look like? And so it's using those references to then generate a likeness of that. And the same thing with beach, like it knows what beach is.
Right.
And yeah, and whatever it has seen, it's then, and I've seen, I've seen presentations and whatnot on the actual like language that they use to describe the way it generates the imagery. And I can't remember it, so I'm sorry for that.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, it's taking that pool of imagery to then like recreate.
I think I've played with AI with images where I'll say like create a picture of a middle-aged couple or something, and then it will give you some sort of feedback, and then you can be like, but make him look sassier and her look funnier, and they'll do that, and then it never gets hands and arms right. Like, I've very much seen this every time. It's like, oh, too many arms, or like fingers are all weird and distorted. And you can start to refine it and be like, can you give her the right number of arms? And then it'll give a random number of arms. It's kind of interesting, but you can like refine your prompt and just see what happens, and it can get funnier and funnier. I've only used it for comedy purposes, but it's kind of interesting how.
Were you bored?
No, I wanted to know how AI works.
Oh.
It's clearly an intellectual investment.
That's
much
what all
like
scientists say whenever they're bored and just doing something randomly. It's like, oh, it's a scientific experiment.
I also used AI the other weekend to make AI rewrite the plot of like every famous movie to be about chimney sweeps. Like Titanic was about chimney sweeps, and
should we be worried about you?
Yeah. But I think when it comes to graphic design, like you can prompt it and have it refined, but at least it's not good enough yet to like fully nail it.
Control. So Adobe is working on a whole bunch of stuff, and so Adobe has some generative, fills, and like you can prompt it to create within Photoshop. And so for my Christmas card this year, I had my kid put himself in a box. And so we did a whole like, he's coming from Santa, whatever. And I wanted to get my other son into the picture. So I can composite him into the picture, relatively easily. Like I have the knowledge and tools to make that happen pretty well. But one of the pictures I was using that I liked, how his face was looking, the top of his head was cropped off. And so I'm like, hey, let's see if I can make this happen with the AI generative fill. And so, circle the top of his head and said like, hey, just like add in the rest of his head. Like that seems like something totally usable, like something that's easy that you should be able to do. So it did an okay job, and you know what it did? added a hand in the background of one. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Like,
It
look,
does that.
I can make a hand. It was really, really odd and creepy.
Here's the top of a head, but it also
Did
is
you-
growing a limb.
Did you use that one?
No, I didn't use it. But maybe I did, and I cut out, like I removed the hand. So
I think that people must have really high expectations for your Christmas card, given that you and your husband are graphic designer artists. Like, if I got just a regular family photo, I'd be like, oh, they're really phoning it in this year.
I'd kill to have a family photo with an extra hand coming out of one of my kids' heads.
Wow. Yeah, but last year I made an augmented reality card with a whole 3D like pop-up box that it was a music box that it was fun. It was cool.
Wow.
But yeah, this is what I
Can I be on your Christmas card list?
Sure. Sure. That was way cooler than the creepy hand from AI. Yeah. But I mean, so it did I did have to extend the room, and I asked it to generate some like extra parts of my room, and it did an okay job. It was passable, but it was nothing like, I don't know. It's nothing I couldn't do on my own. It saved me maybe a few minutes, but.
So I like how you're using it to save time and also enhance your own work, as opposed to, I think the fear and the anxiety is coming from people being like, I'm going to be replaced because they're going to say like, generate a family where a kid's in a Christmas box, and then they use it for the ad campaign for like boxes or whatever. But currently the tools with generating those images put in hands or get the wrong number of arms and stuff. And as it gets refined, maybe that's a bigger fear, but it does have great advantages to be able to just be like, I have somewhat of what I want if I can just alter this, as opposed to trying to like corral all of my children and get the right picture again.
This is one of the things that uses. I'm sorry. Did you?
No, go for it.
I was going to say, with creative writing, and people talk about how artificial intelligence can create a rough draft, but it's not very original. It's pretty boring, and then a human can edit you can use it as a starting point. And I was hearing you say something similar. Is you ask the artificial intelligence tool to create an image, and then you use that as a starting point, and then you use your own personal creativity and skills to augment it and make it better. But the thing that I worry about, and this is true for the written word as well, people who know nothing about graphic art are going to say, I don't need a graphic artist anymore because I can just use this tool. And they don't know what they're missing, and they don't know what they're actually getting.
Yeah, and I guess we're going to be using AI as a tool. That's inevitable. Like there's, we have to start training our students to be able to generate using that. But there is going to be, and it sort of exists now. We have tools like Canva that allows like people to create designs with sort of stock templates and stock imagery, and so those people can do the work without, I guess, consulting a graphic designer or an artist and their expertise. So it cuts them out because they maybe can't afford to, use a graphic designer. But still, the companies that value the like unique branding, design, those folks are still going to use designers. But there's a lot of that middle, and lower end design work that's probably going to just disappear, which has already happened. I mean, you can make a website using Wix or whatever without consulting a designer or a developer. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's, democratizing creation. But, not necessarily all of that work is going to be
High quality.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so does it all need to be? Maybe not. But I mean, the amount of content that we're consuming, though, is, increased dramatically, with social media and whatnot. And so
if you want to stand out, you want to have higher quality too. I think that, I've tried to make my own website for various things, and I always just abandon them because it just like doesn't look good, and it's not nearly as functional as like somebody who's trained in it. And I think another good use of AI, at least for me, is when I have written something for like a scientific paper and you feed it to AI and ask it to edit it, you can see where maybe common misconceptions might be based on what you said, because the AI will like reword stuff and you're like, but that's not what I meant. But clearly that's how it's interpreting through this filter of way more information than I have. so it can help me rewrite but not rely on. And I feel like maybe that's kind of where it can come in sort of for graphic design.
Yeah, well, and like again, it's a tool, and so we've used it as a tool to help us, in my classes to generate like ideas for copy. So we're not copywriters, and we're learning about graphic design, but we'd like to give our clients, work that has decent copy on it. So this is just the written message, right? And so we'll use AI to help us generate some ideas, and we're cutting out the copywriter there, which, that's sort of the same boat that the designers are in. And we've also, we're using it for code, same thing. So like developing simple like side scroller games, we are using ChatGPT to help us generate the code. And so it's
cutting out the computer scientist.
Well,
yeah.
Again. And so, yeah, what does that, I guess what it allows for is, the single person or the amateur to develop, in these spaces. And so, that's one thing that even social media has done. It's allowed people to become creators and express themselves, which is, I think that's also a good thing. It's just the economic ramifications of AI, and just, I don't know, sometimes, like where, that's bigger, like way bigger. How are we going to exist when there are no jobs for people to be going to every day? And like, how do you create purpose, and how do you
well, just similar to like after COVID, the corporate business real estate industry tanked because so many people are working from home and you don't need these massive office buildings. Or I'm sure there was a panic of, what are the people, furriers who put shoes on horses? Whatever those people are. Like, I'm sure they panicked when cars came about. Like, nobody's going to need horseshoes anymore or whatever. So economies change and evolve, and it doesn't mean that there won't be jobs. We're just going to have to also be creative in what we do. Or we can all become those blob people from WALL-E on a spaceship.
What I worry about in this regard is it's going to be a concentration of resources to a few, and there's going to be a separation where instead of having the traditional large middle class with a small upper class and a small lower class, it's going to become a massive lower class with a few oligarchs who basically pull all the strings and control 90% of the wealth of the planet.
You thought that hasn't already happened? I'm pretty sure the middle class is.
But in all honesty, I think that's the fear. And what are we going to do as a society to make sure that we respect and all people, and not just the small few who pull the levers of these tools and control the tools? And look what happened with Amazon. And it started just as a small bookseller in some sense, as a online thing, and now it's this massive thing who the owner is like one of the richest people on the planet. And it's just this way of technologies has this way of, in some sense, concentrating wealth. And
making monopolies.
And that's what I worry about. So on one hand, they people will want to say, hey, it's going to make our lives easier because you're not going to have to do this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, okay, but am I going to get my needs taken care of?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the future is going to be in that regard.
And that's I just thinking about the implications of this technology and the idea if it should be created and how, and thinking through the results of the creation. Like, it's an awesome, cool thing to explore and develop, but like you gotta just thinking about being socially responsible when developing these things, which is like, I don't know. I think back to Jurassic Park and
I think
like, we're fascinated by what we can create, but don't
maybe
worry.
Not a good idea.
Yeah, but maybe it's not a good idea.
I think that happens. That's a very good relationship to the sciences, because we can do a lot of things that have been determined to be unethical, and therefore just because we could potentially clone people, or just because we can do certain like gene editing and whatever, we have created laws to say like, don't do that because that's not okay, or you're changing the genome of potentially the entire human species. And so it's a kind of, you're exactly right. Just because we can, now it's catching up in different fields where we've been dealing with this issue for a long time in the sciences. So we have like bioethicists. Maybe we need like computational ethicists to decide what we should and shouldn't do in litigate around that. But with that, I whacked the microphone. With that, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Lewis University. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Lewis University name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. Talking to you, AI. This podcast was produced in the WLRA podcast studios at Lewis University. Visit lewisu.edu for more information about Lewis University. This has been Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White
and
Kristin Callahan.
thanks.